Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The hadith of Unwaan al Basri. And we explained how, as a result and in proportion to his understanding and acknowledgement of the status of imamat and who is the imam, his proximity towards the imam in proportion to his knowledge of the imam would progress. And one of the reasons that the imam had rejected him was that he had yet to acknowledge who the imam is, and that knowledge, who he's acquiring knowledge from. It started off with, I want to acquire knowledge from you, like with Malik, but at the end it was a totally different ball game. So we went through that, and then he came and the Imam accepted him after he went through various stages of sorrow, spiritual sorrow, sorrow which works for one's betterment, not for one's detriment. Then he did tawassul, and finally it was his adab that he had, the etiquette of the Imam. And then the Imam now starts. So here the Imam is now starting his prescriptions, and this is something we should all try to do. Very important spiritual mentors like Sayyid Ali Qadi have said that this hadith should be with you in your pocket, and at least once a week you have to go through this hadith. He would give this instruction to his students. One must once a week go through this hadith of Unwaan al Basri, because it's a spiritual prescription given by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and it seems to be a very comprehensive one. Then now Imam, he wants to start off and give his guidelines. He starts off like this: ليس العلم بالتعلم. Very important opening sentence. That knowledge isn't through learning. You don't acquire knowledge from outside yourself. You don't acquire knowledge from external things to you. You acquire it through something internal. Now look, bear with me here. ليس العلم بالتعلم. Knowledge isn't through learning. إنما هو, where only knowledge is only نور يقع في قلب من يريد الله تبارك وتعالى أن يهديه. That what knowledge is, it's only a light which is situated in the hearts of those who Allah wants to guide. So here we see the nature of this knowledge is on a par with spiritual guidance. It's this knowledge which is of use in the hereafter. And this knowledge which is of benefit for your divine guidance is not to be acquired through learning. It's a knowledge which is situated in the heart. That's the first thing. And Allah will give it to those for guidance, but they have to do something to get it. But the point is, true knowledge leads you closer to Allah. True knowledge makes you successful to be guided on Allah's path. Medicine, architecture, all these are of value. They have value in them. They're speaking about everything of Allah's manifestations. But whether it will get you close to Allah, whether it will guide you, not necessarily so. Not only lecture, even the seminary studies. It's through learning in the seminaries. Most of the subjects, it's through learning, through teachers outside you, through books. So even studying the seminary studies isn't a guarantor. Then, the wording is very precise here. That's why I'm going a bit slowly to start off with. فَإِنْ أَرَدْتَ الْعِلْمِ. After explaining what knowledge is, if you seek this knowledge, فَاطْلُبْ فِي نَفْسِكَ, seek it inside yourselves. If you want it, you have to seek it inside yourselves. Okay, seek what inside ourselves? حقيقة العبودية. If you want this knowledge which will grant you divine spiritual guidance, which was the opening sentence in this session, you first have to look inside, and that which you have to look for inside you, you may read or listen to a lecturer. These are external things. Listening to a lecturer won't necessarily be the be-all or end-all. Something has to happen inside you. The lecturer, the speeches, the books are just preliminary factors. They're not the essential cause. The cause has to come through your heart. Now, here in this protocol of Imam Sadiq, he's going to tell you what to do to succeed in this knowledge. But first he's saying where to look for it. It's in your heart. And second is what to look for in your heart. The answer is حقيقة العبودية, the reality of servitude. That's what you have to find inside your heart in order to acquire knowledge and thus be guided spiritually. The next part of the same sentence, watlub, and also seek al-ilma, this knowledge. The first part was seek knowledge inside you and seek the servitude, the reality of servitude. The second is watlub al-ilma bisti'malihi. The second source of you seeking this knowledge is through acting on a par with, acting upon that which you have sought in relation to the reality of ubudiyah. So there are two sources here. One is they're both inside, but one of them is you have to first understand inside from within the reality of ubudiyah, and second, you have to act upon it. And then wastafhim Allah yufhimk. Then ask Allah, and then Allah will make you understand. Ask Allah for guidance and He will make you understand. Okay. So the first question, after Imam Sadiq said this, the first question naturally is, what is this reality of ubudiyah? And then the Imam replied to Unwaan. So Unwaan asks, what's the reality of this ubudiyah? The Imam Sadiq alayhi salam replied, ثلاثة أشياء, three things. أن لا يرى العبد لنفسه فيما خوله الله ملكا. That which Allah has granted you of wealth, you don't see yourself the owner of that wealth. You don't see that wealth as being لنفسه, being yours. You're not the owner of any wealth. That wealth may be knowledge, it may be money, it may be your house, it may be your child. You shouldn't see yourself as the owner of anything. لأن العبيد, because the true slave, لا يكون لهم ملك, has no wealth of their own. يرون المال مال الله. They see all wealth as Allah's wealth. It's all Allah's. Instead of my house, it's not mine, Allah's. My child, it's Allah's. My knowledge, it's Allah's. You own nothing. This is servitude. This you have to introspect and get to some understanding of it. Then يَدَعُونَهُ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِهِ, and you would then assign your wealth as that, in that way, whichever way Allah has ordered you or enjoined you to spend wealth. So that's the first axis to the reality of servitude. Now the Imam will explain more about this in a minute. But then the second axis, وَلَا يُدَبِّرَ الْعَبْدُ لِنَحْتِبِيرًا, that the servant shouldn't plan for oneself. Any planning. They shouldn't plan for themselves. This is something which is very difficult to digest for many people, especially those living in a capitalist state, so to speak. But I'll explain more about this once I go through the third axis, and that is وَجُمْلَةُ اشْتِغَالِهِ فِي مَا أَمَرَهُ تَعَالَى بِهِ وَنَهَاهُ عَنْهُ, and everything that they become occupied with, everything that they do, has to be on a par with that which Allah has enjoined, be it wajib, be it mustahab, be it ethical, be it irfani, be it sharia, be it tariqah. And so everything that they do, it has to be on a par with that which Allah enjoins, be it the sharia or the tariqah, and it has to be on a par with that which Allah has forbidden in the sharia and the tariqah. So the do's and don'ts, you have a criterion. It's Allah's do's and don'ts. Now it may be the do's and don'ts of the sharia or the do's and don'ts of the tariqah. But you see, by abiding by this alone, you have no ego. You have no ego here. You're just abiding by how Allah has assigned His duties upon you. The duties of the sharia, for example, you need a job, you have to provide for the family, you have to do your salat, you have to do fasting, and so on and so forth. Or your duties of the tariqah, which if you don't succeed, it's not a sin, but you'll be growing more if you live on a par with the do's and don'ts of the tariqah. Either way, you're not making the decisions. You're purely acting on a par with Allah's will here. We are simulating the ma'soom by fulfilling these three, even though it's only on the facade of things to start off with. When I say you're simulating the ma'soom, in this way, I mean you're simulating the ma'soom, because the ma'soom, their will is annihilated in Allah's will. And here, when you do succeed in these three axes, there is no will for yourself. You're totally, to the best of your ability, acting on a par with that which Allah has said, not that which you want. Okay. Now with this third axis, the second axis becomes more understandable. So you can plan in relation to that which Allah has enjoined you or discouraged you, be it irrespective of whether it's in the domain of the sharia or the tariqah. But anything outside that, it's your own doing. You wanted to do it. Your ego will be enhanced. Then the Imam goes through some of the effects of these three axes. فَإِذَا لَمْ يَرَ الْعَبْدُ لِنَفْسِهِ فِي مَا خَوَّلَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى مِلْكًا. In relation to the first one, if the servant truly doesn't see himself or herself as the owner of anything, that which Allah has granted him, they're not the owner. They don't see themselves as the owner of anything. What's the benefit? هَانَ عَلَيْهِ الْإِنْفَاقِ فِيمَا أَمَرَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى أَن يُنْفِقَ فِيهِ. That it would be easy for one to give away their wealth in relation to that which Allah has enjoined them to give away their wealth to. Now, this is in relation to the zakat, the khums, and even things which aren't wajib. Once you don't see yourself as the owner of it, you give away much easier, because you don't see yourself as the owner of that money. This can apply to the receiver of the money. Sometimes the employee wants to get something from the employer. The employer, if they act on a par with these three axes, will give the employee right on time. The employer will never delay giving the employee his rights. He won't delay it. He says, this is the employee's right. It's not my wealth. I'm going to give it very easily. The employee too. Sometimes the employer may, for whatever reason, legitimate reason, may delay giving it. Here the employee shouldn't be disappointed. The reason the employee becomes disappointed may be because he thinks he's the owner of that money. You see how delicate things can become. He thinks he's the owner of that money, and he becomes disappointed. Even if the employer was to throw him out without giving him his wages, he shouldn't be disappointed. He can retaliate and get his right back, but he shouldn't be disappointed, because everyone has a right to their own property. But be disappointed. The reason he's disappointed because he really thinks in real terms he's the owner of that property, whereas that's not the case. Then the effect of the second axis. وَإِذَا فَوَّضَ الْعَبْدُ تَدْبِيرَ نَفْسِهِ عَلَى مُدَبِّرِهِ هَانَ عَلَيْهِ مَصَائِبُ الدُّنْيَا. Here with the second, when you shouldn't plan, if someone truly disposes all one's affairs, entrusts all one's affairs on the planner, and doesn't plan for oneself outside the jurisdiction of Allah's command or discommand, if one entrusts oneself, i.e. acting purely on a par with Allah's will, be it in the Sharia or the Tariqah, here, even if the worst of burdens was to come one's way, they would never become disappointed. It would be easy for them. The reason people become disappointed when they encounter a burden is because they are planning. They are the master planner, and that their plans have been damaged. So this was the second effect. And the third, وَإِذَا اشْتَغَلَ الْعَبْدُ بِمَا أَمَرَهُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى وَنَهَاهُ لَا يَتَفَرَّغُ مِنْهُمَا إِلَى الْمِرَاءِ وَالْمُبَاهَاةِ مَعَ النَّاسِ. And if one purely acts and all one's preoccupations during the day is only on acting upon Allah's do's and don'ts, be it of the Sharia or the Tariqah, these people will never become free. They will never get the time to then boast in front of others or act as if they are superior to others when they're with the people. Because all they will say to people is, this is my duty. It's only when the ego plans and you act on a part not of Allah's will, your own will, then superiority, boasting, posing in front of others, it will only come about in those times. Okay. So this was the servitude to, this was the reality of servitude. Now look, then Imam Sadiq says, There are 9 actions. Now, with these 9 actions, if you commit yourself to these 9 actions, it would be very easy for you. You would be laying the groundwork for your heart to incorporate the reality of servitude. And when the heart does that, then you can say you have knowledge of a divine nature. Imam Sadiq, he says there are 9 actions. فَإِنَّهَا, these 9, wasiyati, is my testament. For who? لِمُرِيدِ الطَّرِيقِ إِلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. This is my testament for those who want and are seeking the way to Allah. Look how important this is. And Sayyid Ali Qadi said, you should, in Qom, for example, this hadith has been published in very small booklets that you can even fit in your pocket, the pocket of your shirt or whatever. And he said, always keep it with you, but once a week, at least once a week, go through it. There was one Ustad I had, he said, read it in the morning to remind yourself. Every morning, read it. But at least once a week. Now, these 9 instructions are divided into 3 sets of 3. The first one is in relation to disciplining your soul. And here it wants to tame, control your animalistic lusts and whims, your shahwa. The aim with the first 3 is to suppress your shahwa. Then the aim of the second class of 3 prescriptions out of the 9, the aim is to suppress your conquering nature or your irascible appetite. And then the last 3 is in relation to you suppressing your self-adorning nature. But self-adorning doesn't only mean adorning in the physical sense. It's more to do with self-adorning of an inner nature. We'll come to that soon, inshallah. I'm not sure how much we're going to get through in this session, but so in relation to the first 3, فَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَأْكُلَ مَا لَا تَشْتَهِي. Refrain from eating when you have no appetite. When you have no appetite for eating, don't eat. Animals eat even when they have no appetite. That's animalistic. You shouldn't aggravate your animalistic dimension. And you eat in that if you don't do what animals do. And there are many in the treatises of the religious authorities, there are a lot of adab and etiquettes in relation to eating. For example, eating slowly, eating in small morsels, eating in congregation. These are all mustahabbat. And the rationale behind them is because animals eat fast. Animals eat in large morsels. And animals eat alone, not in congregation, for example. We want to suppress our shahwa, our animalistic lusts and whims here. One way of that is through food. If you succeed and you discipline your soul through the food route, then other parts of you will also work in harmony with the success you acquire in this domain of food. And then you would acquire discipline in other walks of life. And you would diminish your shahwa in other walks of life. Now, why has food been mentioned? Because it's something very dominating in our daily lives. 2 or 3 times a day, at least, we consume food. So here on the tablecloth, there's a lot of adab the imams have given. You know, the tablecloth is called sufre. And sufre comes from safar. And safar means journeying And here, by taming your animalistic dimension on the sufra, you would be getting closer to Allah, because you're taming your animalistic side, and as a result, you're becoming more and more closer to Allah. فَإِنَّهُ يُورِثُ الْحِمَاقَةَ وَالْبَلَاءَ. Because when you have no appetite to eat, you're eating in that state would add to your stupidity, but stupidity of a spiritual nature. You'll do a lot of spiritually futile things. Things which are not haram, but they're futile, they're vain. And you seem to do a lot of these things. It may be watching television, it may be laughing unnecessarily. That's what happens when you overdo it. In this aspect, you have no appetite, you've had your food, you finish your food and you're satiated, but you still continue eating. It's side effects of spiritual. وَلَا تَأْكُلْ إِلَّا عِنْدَ الْجُوعِ. And eat only when you're hungry. Only when you're hungry, eat. Animals don't do this. Humans have to do this. But we have to lead a lifestyle of humans. So only when you're hungry, you eat. That hunger has to be there. Sometimes you're neither hungry nor full. Don't eat. Only when you're hungry, eat. Then, وَإِذَا أَكَلْتَ, when you eat, فَكُلْ حَلَالًا, eat only halal things, وَسَمِّ اللَّهَ, and recite Allah's name, وَاذْكُرْ حَدِيثَ الرَّسُولِ, when you're eating, recall, so only eat halal, only say Bismillah when you eat, and when you eat, recall this hadith of the Holy Messenger, مَا مَلَأَ آدَمِيٌّ وِعَاءً شَرًّا مِنْ بَطْنِهِ, that humankind do not fill any vessel worse than that of their stomach. Recall this. And then, in relation to the third, he says, وَلَا بُدَّ. This is the last of the first three. فَثُلْثٌ لِلطَّعَامِ وَثُلْثٌ لِلشَّرَابِ وَثُلْثٌ لِلنَّفَسِ. So when you eat, a third of your stomach, fill it with food, a third with drink, and a third with air. Leave it open so you don't be filled up. You shouldn't become fully satiated. Okay, now what here? And those who have listened to the esoteric dimensions of menstruation, I discussed this aspect, but for reasons of time, if I cover the esoteric aspects of this, the first three, I think we won't have time to continue. And so with your permission, although in the Q&As, maybe, but let me go through another three also, because with each of these, there are esoteric meanings of not filling yourself. But yes, okay. So the second set is in relation to hilm, acquiring forbearance. And then here, the three are as follows, the three prescriptions. فَمَنْ قَالَ لَكَ, if someone says to you, إِنْ قُلْتَ وَاحِدَةً سَمِعْتَ عَشْرًا, if someone says to you that if you say one matter, you'll hear 10 from me. If someone says that to you, فَقُل, you reply, إِنْ قُلْتَ عَشْرًا لَمْ تَسْمَعْ وَاحِدًا. You reply that if you say 10 things, you won't hear one thing from me. Now, this saying and replying here doesn't have to be a verbal state of affairs. This thing of, if someone was to say to you, if someone was to say to you that if you say one thing, I'll give you 10 in return and you'll hear 10 from me, it doesn't have to be a physical event or scenario or episode. This has to be your inner state of affairs. This has to be your inner status quo, your inner spiritual status quo. That even if that person was to say 10 things to you, I won't reply even with one thing. Now look, so irrespective of whether they actually say it physically or not, this is what you have to acquire. Now, if it's your right, if someone has trampled over your rights, that's okay. You have to retaliate. You have to get your right back, because being silent in the face of oppression is something which is a sin and is not on a par with Allah's satisfaction, be it in the Sharia or the Tariqah. One of Allah's names is Al-Adl. You have to manifest that. So here in this prescription, it's in relation to in futile matters, something which is outside Allah's jurisdiction of satisfaction. Why do you have to answer him? Why do you have to answer someone? Let them say 10 things, but they won't listen to any. You don't reply even one thing. So when it's outside Allah's, the third axis to the reality of servitude, when it's matters outside that, you don't let them say 10 things to you. There's nothing, you don't have to say anything, because it's futile. As I say, if it's on a par with the Sharia, that's your duty, you would have to do that. Today was the day of Quds, the last Friday of the holy month of Ramadan. The silence we see from different society, especially in Muslim countries, the silence we see is something which is spiritually detrimental to the duty bound. If someone is silent in heart, in action, in tongue, before the oppressors, and the reasoning is something that, well, they're going to do us harm. They may harm us. Our jobs may be affected. Look how far they are from servitude. Our livelihoods may be affected. Look how far they are from the golden principle, wish for others that which you wish for yourself, which all civilizations have. The Holy Prophet would never compromise with the enemy. Even where there were treaties made, they were known as the enemy and treated as the enemy. But there was no other way. We had to make a treaty with them. But they didn't become all of a sudden good people that we have to respect. Now, sometimes someone may live in the West and they have to respect the law of the land. That's true. But it's true to the same degree that if someone is in a desert and there's only pork, they would have to then consume that much pork to save their lives. Yes, you're in a foreign land. You may be belittled. You may be committing a lot of haram. You may be cooperating with a lot of haram. You may be assisting with a lot of haram through taxes, through other things. Okay, but get out of there. Do whatever you deem suitable and beneficial, and then leave. Why are you continuing the wrong way of life and being comfortable with that way of life, being comfortable with giving your taxes for the wrong causes? And for those who want to stay in those countries, don't get me wrong, it's still possible. But you have to really work hard. And you have to work against forces of oppression. How come after 10, 20, 40 years there, everything around you Your education, your certificate, your house, your family, your children, your livelihood, everything is increasing. But still, your voice against oppression in that oppressed land hasn't increased a single bit. There's something wrong here. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying you have to be honest with yourself and not be comfortable there. Okay, let's not divert too much. Then the second prescription with the forbearance. وَمَنْ شَتَمَكَ فَقُلْ لَهُ. Someone who insults you. Look, in these three which we're speaking about, which wants to enhance your ilm, your forbearance, the aim, the rationale behind it is to suppress your conquering soul, your conquering faculty. Because animals get what they want. When they feel that they're threatened in any way, they'll retaliate, irrespective of the nature of that threat. We're not like that. We only act on our duty. It may not be on a par with our duty. We may want to conquer something or fight back because of our egos. We're not allowed to do that spiritually. Someone who insults you, this is what you have to say to them. Not necessarily a verbal saying, but this has to be your inner status quo. You have to say this, the Imam says, In kunta sadiqa. If with the insults and the way you're speaking with me, if what you say is true, in kunta sadiqan fi ma taqul, fa as'alullaha an yaghfira li. I ask Allah to forgive me wholeheartedly. Wa in kunta kadhiban fi ma taqul. But if the way you're insulting me and the things you're saying, if it's a fabrication, here فَاللَّهَ أَسْأَلُ أَن يَغْفِرَ لَكَ. I ask Allah to forgive you. But look, you never insult them. You never go against them. That would be your ego. They've attacked you. They've attacked your ego. They didn't attack the community, let's say. They only attacked you with an insult. Why would you have to go back? Why? There's no need to retaliate. You forgive them. It's a one-to-one affair. And if what they said was true, you make amends. If what they said was a lie, them. This is the way of Ahlul Bayt. وَمَنْ وَعَدَكَ بِالْخَنَاءِ فَعِدْهُ بِالنَّصِيحَةِ وَالرَّعَاءِ. If someone threatens you with foul language, with kind of blasphemy or foul language, things on that nature, you promise them your well wishes, your advising them, and your careful observation over them, your care in their regard. They may use foul language. Look, you're taming this conquering. Animals will retaliate quickly. You're a human. And with your permission, although the Q&As may be lesser tonight, but I'll compensate for it tomorrow, inshallah. I just want to finish this hadith. And finally, the self-adorning nature. This has to be suppressed too. But self-adorning in what regard? Imam says, this is the last three prescriptions. فَاسْأَلِ الْعُلَمَاءِ مَا جَهِلْتَ. Ask the scholars that which you are ignorant of. Ask them. You have, because it's a duty to get rid of your ignorance. So ask the scholars. وَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَسْأَلَهُمْ تَعَنُّتًا وَتَجْرِبَةً. However, don't ask questions to the scholars to embarrass them or to test them. Because when you do that, when you know something, you want to test that scholar. It's not out, you're not ignorant, you know the answer. Someone very learned has taught you. You've read a very important book. Why are you asking someone about this issue now? You've understood it. You've exited the realms of ignorance. What? There's no need. And here, your ego is being aggravated when you ask someone a question which you know the answer to. Now, you either want to embarrass them, belittle them, or you want to test them. Either way, you're aggravating your ego. This is an illness. This is an illness. You should refrain from that. You want to self-adorn yourself because knowledge is something which differentiates us from humans to a significant degree. And therefore, it's something that you want to pose now in front of other fellow humans, because it's something which you can then regard yourself as higher and superior to your fellow kind. This is one way. Be careful. Don't ask to embarrass or to test. Asking questions is only to come out of ignorance. Full stop. Now, someone may say, well, I want to get the right answer. It's okay. But that doesn't mean you have to go and ask 5 different scholars. You go on first to your duty as to who is the most learned in that field, and then go towards their students, instead of starting with scholars who may not acquire or merit that position. And at the end of the day, you're causing a spiritual detriment to yourself when you undergo this wrong journey. The second, وَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَعْمَلَ بِرَأْيِكَ شَيْئًا. Also, refrain from acting upon your personal opinion. وَخُذْ بِالْإِحْتِيَاطِ فِي جَمِيعِ مَا تَجِدُ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. Refrain from acting on a par with your personal opinion. And wherever there's way of precaution, take it. So here sometimes, even in matter, not only in fiqh, where one hears of stories in different parts of the world where people who have no training in the seminary studies, they are disseminating the khums and zakat money in ways which go against the Sharia. This is a definite no-go area, because this you have to act upon the most learned. But since they have a thriving to economically gain more money, the most learned they belittle with 1 or 2 sentences and say this doesn't make sense. This sentence, this doesn't make sense, when the other party is a jurist who studied for 40, 50, 60 years, be rest assured it's the ego speaking. It's not on a par with Imam Sadiq's teachings. No one is saying the jurist is infallible, but everyone has to know their own limit, and they have to guide if they see something is going wrong, rather than on a par with this second prescription, rather than acting on one's personal opinion. Now, this was in relation to 1 or 2 fiqhi matters, but even in doctrinal matters of aqa'id, if you haven't done the necessary studies, why is it that in every other science in university you would be looked down upon if you just give your own opinion, but suddenly in religious matters you give your own opinion? At least where there's room for ihtiyat, refrain from this. And finally, wahrub min al-futya. Now this is very specific for the jurists. The one before was for the merely. But here the jurists, okay, you may be a mujtahid, but refrain from giving fatwas. In the manner of harbaka min al-asad, in the way you would run away from a lion, run away from giving fatwas in fiqh. Don't do that. Run away. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ رَغَبَتَكَ لِلنَّاسِ جِسْرًا. And don't assign your neck as a bridge for people to pass over, i.e., making their faults be a result of your faults. Don't let them say, well, he said so, that's why we followed him. Run away from giving fatwas. No one should go towards giving fatwas. There has to be some divine sign guiding you to permit you to go. Otherwise, no sane mind would ever decide to enter this field and give fatwas. There were many people, I don't want to mention their names, who refrained from becoming a religious authority, even though close family members of those people did become religious authorities. However, they refrained, even though it was common knowledge that those people may have been even more knowledgeable. But they would never go. They would always run away from it. And this is something which all mujtahids have to bear in mind. A sane mind would never willfully go towards wanting to issue fatwas. There has to be some divine, it has to be under some divine kind of auspice that they actually do such a thing. Inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. Finished, yes. Assalamu alaikum. All right. Are there any questions? Or? Okay. Yes, so here, for example, you have a house, you're in your house, you're married with 2 children, and you have a house, and everything is fine. Yeah. To get a bigger house for posing in front of people or showing off, that would not be on a par with Allah's satisfaction. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with a big house. Actually, we have a hadith that it's a blessing from Allah to have a big house. However, if let's say you get a bigger house, but the glitter of the dunya, the luxury has increased, that is against Allah's satisfaction. This would be acting on a par with something which you have planned. It wasn't on a par with Allah's planning. Or for example, you're occupied with a job and it's enough to provide the expenses for your house and your family. And then you now are running here and there to find another job, a better job. This is your planning. Rather, if you were to be patient and wait, then a door open up before you, that door would be a good sign, because you didn't anticipate such a divine opening. You didn't expect it. But if you keep on running for something when the way your livelihood is average, it's okay. But you want to get a higher livelihood and you keep on looking for a job, that's not on a par with Allah's satisfaction, because the ego is being accentuated day after day. Or when you want to marry someone, here, when you want to marry, let's say it's still a mustahab action. I mean, you won't sin if you don't marry. Because if you were to sin, if you don't marry, if you were to sin, then marrying becomes wajib. But let's say you haven't reached that stage. It's still a mustahab act. Then you keep on researching different sisters or brothers to marry. This is your own doing. Be patient. Let Allah plan. Then a door will open up for you. If you keep on running, you're going to become blinded to these divine doors which are opening to you every day. But since you're planning yourself, you're becoming blind to those doors. Sure. That, that which the Sharia has ordered you towards. So, for example, the Sharia has told you to the wajibat of the nafaqah. You have to do it. Your children, your spouse, and so on. Even the nafaqah of your parents. These things are wajib. You spend your wealth on that which Allah has told you how to spend. And then there are things which education of your children or the propagation of Islam, the helping the masjid. These are all recommended forms of charities. There's no problem. But then sometimes it's traveling somewhere for worldly entertainment alone. It's not haram, but you won't be spiritually growing from that. You won't be spiritually benefiting from that. And yes. No, but um, alislam.org has has translated this hadith, and you can, for example, also Ibrahim Amini's book, the late Ayatollah Ibrahim Amini. He has a book called Self Building or Self Refining. In that book, the hadith has been translated. Also, alislam.org also has different versions of this hadith in other books. You can photocopy it, for example, and keep it with you. But those which I was referring to in the book markets in Qom, they are only in Arabic and Farsi, unfortunately. I haven't seen the English. But you know, the English we have to be very careful with, because the section on planning, they sometimes translate it in another way. It shows the translator had a difficulty with saying you shouldn't plan for yourself. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That is the book. Yes, yes. So there is no proper translation, and the translations are very at face value. You can't get to deeper levels, and they don't allow you that access because, as you said, with this book, the reader will never even come to understand that it's referring to another book, another manifestation of the Quran. In any case, so I can't say there's any translation which is the best or is perfect. Um, Amongst the Shia translations, Ali Qoli Qada is maybe the best. Amongst the Sunni translations, Sahih International seems to be the best, and that's my favorite too. Yes, yes. You can find it on Quran.com. Okay, the last question, because it's now 11, I have to leave. Yes. Uh, well, my lectures in the month of Ramadan is finished now. I only have one other session, which is tomorrow night with you, and there I'll detail and I'll be discussing this, that what are the important practical things that we do in the month of Ramadan, and how can we incorporate these very actions throughout the year. So the first thing is keep this notebook, write down the hadith, rec- recall it, and try to incorporate it. That's one thing to how to maintain your spirituality. The second, inshallah, we'll go through tomorrow.